Hey everybody, what's up? I'm Nico.
And I'm TK.
And this is, of course, X is for Comics, an X-Men podcast. Hope you survived the experience, and we are thrilled. We're in our relaunch. We kicked things off with an exciting relaunch into X-Men 98. We did Uncanny 360 through 65. We did X-Men 80 through 84, Unlimited 21 and 22, X-Men and Dr. Doom Annual 98. I noticed that I always call them Unlimited, like there's no other title that's ever had that in its name, but not a big deal. And we're alternating this with Age of Apocalypse. And so we're doing some Age of Apocalypse. We're being ageist, if you will. And I'm very excited about it because I've never actually had a chance to talk about this. I've always taken jabs and barbs at it. But now I'm really excited to have some critical things to say, too.
This is an interesting way to do it, too, because we are using the X-Men Age of Apocalypse Complete Epic series, which is different than like the omnibus or, you know, the publishing order. And the idea is we started at a certain point in 1998, and this X-Men Complete Epic, because the first book is a lot of prequel stuff, it also starts us out publishing wise in 1998.
So prequel sequel is what
prequel,
you mean.
Sequel. And then we're going to go back and cover the actual Age of Apocalypse.
Yeah.
But we will do that after having read a bunch of stuff that was published after the original Age of Apocalypse books. I don't hate this perspective that it's giving me, honestly. I can understand anybody's temptation personally to first read Age of Apocalypse and then go back and read any prequel stuff, and, you know, to maybe separate that out from doing the other stuff that we're doing. But, you know, you came up with this, and I think you picked a good way to cover a bunch of stuff.
I'll be honest, and I appreciate the compliment. It's because I didn't want to cover this chonky boy. I did not want to cover the omnibus because there's stuff missing from it. So then you got to cover this chonky boy, the companion. And I did not want to cover both chonkies. I said to myself, no chonkies, thank you. And so we're doing the epic books. Now, if you caught our preload episode where I sort of read off everything we're covering real fast, so you guys already know what you're in for. But to help everybody be on point today, for Age of Apocalypse Epic Book 1, we're covering X-Men Chronicles 1 and 2, X-Men -1, X-Men Annual 96, Tales from Age of the Apocalypse by the Light, and Tales from Age of the Apocalypse Sinister Bloodlines. What's really interesting is the Chronicles books, like, are from AOA, like, proper, but they're left out of the first omnibus for some reason. And so, like, that was actually, like, the cutting point for me that made me say, I don't know. I think we kind of gotta shift sideways a little bit, because I don't want to leave out something that was part of the conversation, right? And, like, I don't know about you, but while I had, let's go with, varying degrees of success with my read here, there's some A's, there's some B's, some C's, some lower than that. I will say that one of the things that I can't imagine is leaving out the X-Men Chronicles, which were actually released, the first one in January of 95. So, like, how would you leave those out of Age of Apocalypse proper?
Yeah, it's odd because it does sort of flesh out the world in a way that I think is pretty important.
Necessary, yeah.
But at the same time, I like this prequel package.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting package. I just think if this is part of the, you know, original series, it belongs in the Omni.
I agree. And that it's not is baffling.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it's here in the Epic. And just to talk about that package for a minute, the books we're covering, Chronicles #1 from January of 95, Howard Mackey, Terry Dodson, Klaus Janson, Matt Webb, and Comic Craft by Richard Starkings. Tales from Age of Apocalypse featuring Sinister Bloodlines, John Francis Moore, BKV, Steve Epting, Nick Napolitano. Wow, I really said that name so beautifully. Chef's kiss to me. Al Milgram, Kevin Tinsley, Richard Starkings, and for the record, that's Nick Napolitano. So sorry, man. From a Nico to a Nick, I got you. Now, that's from January of 98. From December of 96, so rewinding a little bit, but released later, we have Tales from the Age of Apocalypse featuring X-Men. That's Lobdell Macchio, Joe Bennett, Joe Pimentel, Gloria Vasquez of Digital Chameleon, and Richard Starkings of Comic Craft. We have X-Men Chronicles 2 from April of 95, Mackie, Ian Churchill. The inkers on this, Scott Hanna, Al Vey, Bob Wiakek, Steve Moncuse. We got Matt Webb from Digital Chameleon on colors, and then Richard Starkings of Comic Craft. X-Men -1 and X-Men Annual 96, both written by Terry Kavanagh. The former has Roger Cruz, Bud De La Rosa, Wellington Diaz, Mike Thomas, and Richard Starkings on art, while the latter is Alan Davis, Mark Farmer, Robin Riggs, Tom Vincent, Malibu Color, and Richard Starkings. This is definitely one that I feel is kind of fascinating to talk about, and it definitely... There's a lot that kind of has to go into how we approach this title line, because Age of Apocalypse is introduced in Legion Quest as a rewrite of reality. It's not its own numbered universe. It is specifically the Marvel Universe. 616 is broken. And now it's Age of Apocalypse, to the point where we're going to get into probably my least favorite part of this whole thing, X Universe, later on. The actual characters are being rewritten into horrible, horrible things. It was not very nice what you did to Matt Murdock. So how do you feel about the fact that it was never a reality rewrite, basically? It was always an AU, no matter how hard they tried to lie to us. Because for me, this is what broke my trust.
Yeah, I think I was too young to pick up on it when it was all happening. And now I don't like it because it is a tool they wield constantly. I think your instinct is the correct one. I just didn't experience it at the time.
I didn't at the time either. I did it as a big boy.
It's that thing of like, I often say, I wish they would kill a character and then like put something into like the bylaws of the company that they can't bring the character back, just so that when they say the shocking death, there is some like they literally can't bring this character back, or like they do it because somebody sues and they can't have access to the character again, so they can't bring the character back. It's so wild to me that they don't really ever bring back Uncle Ben, and they don't bring back Karen. Those characters come up in AUs. We have a ton of Gwen Stacy's, but we don't have the 616 Gwen Stacy. It's just a weird thing. Like, just they kind of don't do it for these characters. But I never, even with Uncle Ben, I'm like, at some point they'll run out of things to do, and they'll have to do the shocking return of Uncle Ben. And it's the same thing when they say it's a universe rewrite, and then of course it's a repair when we go back to the status quo. But then, we don't want to miss out on being able to go back to the Age of Apocalypse. Of course not. I get that. I like a bunch of the stories where we go back to the Age of Apocalypse. I particularly like the X-Force run that brings in a lot of the AOA characters. But what that then means is, of course, as you pointed out, it was not a universe rewrite. It was an AU that they can, go into, like so many other ones. And I get why they want that. I get why it has to be that, because those things were popular, but it's not great storytelling. It's really disappointing that after doing it the first time with Age of Apocalypse, they do it constantly with other stuff. They will eventually do it with Age of X-Man or Age of X.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, me too. Like, that's the thing. It's like that's a good one. That's a great one. It's just one of those really frustrating things with the big two, where it's like, well, yeah, if we're gonna have to keep running this company for 120 years and reference these storylines, we're gonna have to do it in a way that simplifies us getting a return on the creative investment that we made publishing the story. I get it, but then make a further creative investment when you write it and build in why it's possible to go back in a way that's not hacky.
Yeah, and speaking of going back in a way that's not hacky, I did leave out X-Men Annual 96's backup story. Ralph Macchio, Terry Dodson, Rachel Pinnock, Joe Andrini, Malibu Color, Richard Starking's Comic Craft. So that's my own, I guess, little, who says you can't go home, right? So we have a lot to cover with this episode, in part because, I do get the balance of the argument, right? Like, you have fiduciary responsibility to continue making as much money as you can. The thing I sometimes feel is Age of Apocalypse gets put on this pedestal, right? But I often feel like I get as much from the 2 issues of Days of Future Past as I do from Age of Apocalypse complete. And I know that's not, I don't get the same amount of content, obviously. I've been reading it. No one needs to tell me that I don't know that. And that's like one of the first things you always see in the comments. But how much there was, right? But how much of this is filler, page space? How much is having to remind us who Cyclops is, to remind us who this Cyclops isn't? And then ultimately, one of the things that this first book does is it has so few issues that were actually originally published, and it fills out that gap so heavily. that this is kind of the only place you see Cyclops in AOA be a shitbag. Other than this, he's actually basically our Cyclops, being like, oh, I went through some stuff and now I'm a good guy all the time, and I'm secretly working against my brother all the time. And like, it's not without this book that's possible. Like, you could not do that without these prequel stories. So I do agree with you that, like, going into it, just to start, I am more positive on reading it this way, because without this, you lose the foresight of understanding and not taking things for granted. I think for all the ways this was bold and brave, because it was, and I'm not being rude, but it was also beholden to the idea that Cyclops always has to be Cyclops.
Well, and that's one of the worst offenders, I think, in AOA the entire time, like from the get-go. Because if you're saying, like, this is a reality rewrite, and not like, because everybody's origins were different, their lives were really different. I like the idea that there's a core to a person that might be the same. It did take me at the time of reading it as a kid, I didn't notice how much Cyclops is Cyclops the entire way through, and really read it as like, it's kind of the switch when he meets Jean. And it really is that the core of Cyclops has this thing where, like, Jean makes him a better man. And so in the presence of Jean, he becomes more like the Cyclops of 616. But it kind of isn't really that. It is kind of exactly as you said, which is further made clear by the fact that this, retcon prequel Sinister Bloodlines book really paints him in like he's basically a good guy that was raised by a bad guy, and once he gets a hint of like what true justice is, he firmly just becomes Cyclops without any of the trappings of Cyclops' life to anchor him to like consistently being a good person. But to me, that's not brave. Like, what's really brave is to be like, yeah, but for the grace of God, Cyclops is a garbage person. Like, if raised by the insane, evil, like, scientists that wanted to raise him, even in mainline continuity, he would be a bad guy. And I think it's kind of telling that whenever they get a chance to do that with Alex, he does become a bad guy. And any slight shift in balance of Alex's origin story, and he can easily be a monster, and it's just totally fine. But not Cyclops. Cyclops is always the Boy Scout. Both stories aren't interesting to me. Alex, I think, is much more complicated than that. And Scott, I love the idea that Scott is a bulwark and a stalwart. He will always be a good guy. But if you're saying this is a completely different timeline, nothing is the same, up is down, then we can spend 4 months of our lives just seeing Scott Summers as a garbage person, and then go back to every moment of the rest of our lives and every moment before this in our lives seeing him as the leader of the X-Men. We will all survive that particular experience. So let's be brave and do it for real.
Because the other thing that this does for me is, I was recently at a panel at a convention where somebody was asked who their favorite supervillain of all time was, and they said Magneto. I've read every single page of him every time, and you know what? Magneto is always right. And I'm like, hold on, whoa. I literally just read issues for this where he is every bit a terrorist for no reason, terrorizing people that are not anti-mutant. He bullies people into being afraid of mutants so he can attack them. Like, to say a character is always right is a little ludicrous. And this comes at a time in history where Magneto had just been a good guy for so long. And then they decided to make him a bad guy again for Jim Lee and Chris Claremont's X-Men Volume 2. And he is suddenly the worst bad guy he's been in decades, 1,000%. And in this, they're just so dead set on making him a good guy. But for me, this good guy Magneto doesn't work without the things he did. So, like, while I appreciate that this whole universe seeks to give us an edgier Wolverine, a Mystique who maybe hasn't tried to assassinate so many people for money, and a Magneto who's always been a good guy in a sense, it lacks the pathos that it took to get there. So it rings hollow without reading everything else. So it's not a standalone universe.
There's also, like, one of the things that has always bothered me about Age of Apocalypse and Magneto's situation in Age of Apocalypse, if he's such a great guy, and then they do try and, like, read him as that guy, why does that man allow his lieutenant teachers to torture the next generation of mutants to, like, not just insanity, but actual, like, abuse, like being okay with them dying, ultimately sacrificing them for one of them, like for Ilyana. I'm talking in this case about Colossus and Kitty, who are, it's not trial by fire, it's not a gauntlet. They are abusive and like bad people and dangerous. And I get, again, it's that thing, like Kitty is, they're doing the thing that they're not doing with Cyclops. Kitty is horrible and just nothing like mainline Kitty. And the idea is like, yeah, her life was just really, really different, and it rotted her. And we can see it for 4 issues, and nobody ever is like, Kitty from mainline continuity, you know, is like this. But that to me is one of those, should be one of those hints that there's something wrong with Eric, Magnus or Max. There's something wrong with Magneto, that he lets those two take care of children. Instead, it's not played for that. It's played for, well, you know, these are harsh times that we have to have tough teachers. He almost kind of ignores them. He doesn't seem to have any idea what's going on there. But that's horrible. And I mean, I don't like 616 continuity, Magneto and Rogue. I know you do. I like them. I do like that. I think they have great chemistry, and Rogue is drawn, Rogue and Magneto are drawn to look age appropriate, but they are not. This is so much worse than Kitty and P Wisdom. And this book is so funny because it is so dedicated to its timeline involving like numbers of years, like specific numbers of years. But Rogue absolutely shows up as a child, and her caretaker mother Mystique is like, hey, I am handing you off to a new parent. This is your dad now. I gotta go. And Magneto is like, here, you are family. Let me give you this very paternal hug.
Yeah, it's Judge Turpin syndrome. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's just, and so that's another thing where I'm just like, these things are not intentional, but I could wrap them all up into an image of Magneto in the Age of Apocalypse, who is not such a great guy.
Well, and just to kind of riff on that, like taking a look at the first book, X-Men Chronicles, which, I mean, you totally killed it with a lot of those references. Yeah. One of the things that really, really, really drives me nuts about Age of Apocalypse, I don't want to hear anybody defend Mr. Vic. By this point, we already knew he did a bunch of things that if I said that he did on this show, by this point, we could never monetize this channel, right? So, like, Sabretooth doesn't do the worst of his things after Age of Apocalypse. We already know he's killed a bunch of women after sexually torturing them. We know he kills children. We know he did a massacre. Like, we know these things about him. And I'm not just talking about the mutant massacre. These are things we already knew about this character well in advance of these events.
Because a lot of them come from wars that preceded Charles Xavier's death.
Yep.
And the thing that, you know, we forget is that Sabretooth basically does remember a lot of stuff that Wolverine doesn't. So Wolverine will have done a lot of terrible things and then have his memory wiped. And the man that you meet is not somebody who is happy that he did those things. He doesn't remember them. He learns about them. He deeply regrets them. And the whole thing is about, how can I make amends for the fact that I actually did do this stuff? And I take responsibility for it. I'm not happy. This man who is learning that I did this stuff isn't happy about it, isn't proud, and regrets it and wants to do better. Sabretooth's story is always the opposite. I was there with Wolverine. I remember doing it. I am not sorry. I'm actually really happy that I did it. And then I did a bunch of other stuff that was worse and horrible that I did specifically because I enjoy doing it. And it's stated clearly before, this is not a retcon, it's stated clearly before Age of Apocalypse starts that he was doing this stuff before Charles Xavier dies, allowing for the Age of Apocalypse. So that man that we see isn't just, and you know, Chronicles starts with a Sabretooth who is on the side of the bad guys. But again, they're playing him as like, oh, he's just like a guy who does crime because he was hired to, like, kind of like Gambit, basically. Like, Gambit, who like committed the mutant massacre, regrets it, and ultimately a big part of that face, maybe he does, who knows, got in trouble for it and swears he won't do it again.
I don't know that he felt bad until he was caught, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But so they give him this vibe of like, he's not a good guy, but he's not the worst guy. And yeah, actually, pretty much by that point, he had already been the worst guy. Potentially for like 50 plus years at that point, because we don't quite have the same knowledge of Sabretooth's age that we do for Wolverine. But he's also very old and probably was born before the start of the 20th century. So he was doing bad shit well before this. We're clear on that, and most of it is not, oh, I saw that we're using nuclear warheads today, so now I feel bad, so I'm gonna turn a new leaf. And then he's just like a good guy.
Yeah. This is not a situation where this is a guy who did a bunch of terrible things, found out he gave Clint Eastwood cancer, and then felt really bad for the rest of his life. This is like a bad dude. And it's not... So one of the things that I actually do really genuinely love about this first volume so much is that almost every one of these books reads like a classic annual. Like, they just got to pack in those classic annuals so you can know what's going on, who's who, what's happening. We get Gideon, we get Kandra, two characters that I could literally not care one fuck less about. But I love knowing what they were up to, so I can just not care about it. Like, it's good to not care about things.
Fully agree. I will say the reveal of them, I need to pull it up because the language just kills me. What just kills me about Age of Apocalypse is Apocalypse's whole thing being his horsemen. And in Age of Apocalypse,
Wait, did you say his horsemen? I'm kidding.
His horsemen. We never really get them, but it's War, Death, Gideon, and Kandra. You know, the four horsemen of Apocalypse. We never get a pestilence, and we never get a famine, and we never get them again. And I just think it's so funny to introduce them and be like, yes, the horsemen of Apocalypse, two that are very clearly horsemen, and then Gideon and Kandra. Like,
well, there's the Gideon's Bible, and then there's the Church of Kandra.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, there's some sloppy things like that. And this is like the Sabretooth thing is widely sloppy. It is sloppy at a high altitude. Like, I just don't think
wholesome sloppy.
You've got to come up with better reasons why he's different. Same thing for Magneto. I think Magneto is sloppy too. It can't just be that Charles died, because Magneto's trauma is one of the things that rots him. And he experienced that. It's trauma from being a survivor of the Holocaust. Yeah. And he experienced that anyway. That's okay. Like, that's a good part about the character. He's not always right, because taking actions informed by trauma is not always going to lead you to right action. It's understandable why you go to the action that you do because of your trauma-informed response. And we can empathize with that, and we can all say, like, oh yeah, due to my trauma, I sometimes feel like I would like to lash out like that. And it's very empowering to see somebody take some power back from themselves from a thing that traumatized them. That's when I say Magneto is right, like, I'm not saying those actions were justified. I'm saying
you're not going on a panel and saying that everything he ever did was right verbatim.
Right. Yeah. Right. But like, there are bad things that Magneto did that I will give a Magneto is right, because it is like, as a gay man, wouldn't I like to bash back? And, we get that. We can understand that and empathize with that and imagine ourselves taking our power back, while also saying probably that is not an action that should be legal, or like that I would encourage somebody to do. These are big concepts that come up in the book that I think just like seem to be beyond the scope of creative and editorial to really wrestle with. Magneto and Creed being really two fantastic examples, but little examples. How did you guys publish this entire thing and not have four solid horsemen of Apocalypse? And then how did you publish this and have two of them and then go, also Gideon and Kandra are here?
And I really want to, you said something that I really loved as a gay man and a Cuban man, but I'm incredibly white Cuban, right? So I have the passing privilege of being an extreme supporter of my culture, the way Magneto is an extreme supporter of his culture and has passing privilege. He's not Glob Herman. He's not Sluck. He's not any of these mutants that when you look at them, you go, oh, well, that guy had trouble in middle school. He's gorgeous.
The next book we're about to cover, or the next like bunch of stuff we're about to cover, the first thing that you see is him pretending to be a human man talking to a group of humans. Like that is his privilege.
And so I really completely vibe with you. And the other thing that I think is sometimes really funny is I do find that when people spend more time developing their writing than writing it, one of the things you walk into is the Bible is greater than the sermon. And so you wind up with, oh my God, and he's got these amazing 4 horsemen, and these are who they are, and these are the things I know they did that I'm never gonna have time to show. And so then when the sermon comes and you have to give the Bible in 30 seconds, you lose some things. And I completely agree with you, because one of the other things that I think is kind of like, it's beautiful, but when you put it like that, it's kind of pointless. Quicksilver, this is the beginning of the bad of Quicksilver. This is the first step in his collapse as a character. This is one of the things that people love to say is why Iceman coming out is so important, because he's so tough in this universe. I don't know. I had the blessed privilege of coming out so young and getting to be part of a family that was so accepting. And one of my partners didn't come out until his 30s. So I am not here saying I know nothing about that. In fact, I have a lot of really strong reactions when I see late in life coming out stories, because there was a period of time where I had to be a secret and I had to stand on the other side of the room. And I'm not trying to tell anyone what their coming out was, but I do have a certain reaction to the number of coming out stories versus the number of queer existence stories. We have a problem in the queer community where everything has to be queer excellence or coming out. There's nothing in between. And we don't talk enough about queer existence. And this is an example of where Iceman is used frequently in discussion. And there's actually nothing here. It's a lot of really cool, OP moves, but the character has no character. And Rogue, instead of absorbing my precious Carol, she absorbs Polaris, who
is not Magneto's child at this time. So
and has been through enough.
Yeah.
So I'm with you completely. There's like so much stuff that's like left on the table, but also they think we're the dog eating scraps.
Also, a huge point of this whole thing is that Magneto ultimately realizes he can touch Rogue because he can produce a biomagnetic field around his body that allows him to touch her. He also gets her pregnant, which I have questions about.
I think it's because she's got Polaris in her. I think it's because she's got that Lorna zap.
But that was basically my question. Why is she not she has Lorna's power, so why doesn't she have the biomagnetic field around her such that she can touch people? And then why isn't she with Remy?
Oh my God, her and Remy is like, it's nails on a chalkboard in this universe. Like, I don't like them together, period.
Yeah.
But this is
it's so weird because she so obviously does not like him. And he so obviously loves her. And she's in love with Magneto, who is her father figure. I thought I remembered it that she absorbed Wanda's situation before Wanda died, that was even grosser, that she ended up with Magneto. But then part of me was like, at least there's a sort of like psychosis to that. When it didn't happen, I was like, I just genuinely, it's so not okay that he is with Rogue, that like, unless there is an even weirder reason why, or there's even like weirder stuff going on, like that she absorbed his daughter, I'm like, I really can't justify it or make it make any sense. It's so funny because Chronicles sort of telegraphs this idea that a bunch of characters are present, but don't matter. Storm, Pietro, and Iceman, I think, are the 3 big ones. And like Pietro not mattering is not a surprise to anybody. That has been the history of the Marvel Universe. He is the definition of tertiary. Character I love, but just
aesthetic I love, not a character I love.
Well, there is his run in X Factor, and particularly his interactions with Doc Samson, and then the dissolution.
Quicksilver. I'm so sorry. I thought you said Colossus. Oh no, no. Quicksilver's great.
Yeah, Pietro, not Piotr.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That's the problem when one guy names everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, so Pietro, I mean, but I think he's really cool, but he's constantly treated tertiarily. He so rarely matters, and when he does matter, it's just to be horrible. It's just to be a weird little weasel man. And I do think he's so much more than that. It's such a bummer. Colossus kind of is tertiary in a similar way in this book, but again, like, is so starkly horrible and is so starkly evil that at least they have like him and Kitty, who basically really don't do a lot. I mean, the Generation X is about the kids, but like they plant the flag of torturing children, And that's a really easy thing to remember. You can keep pointing to it, and you can point to Colossus having the Berserker rage at the very end of the series to try and go get Ilyana. But other than that, they don't really do a whole lot. And then Pietro, Storm, and Bobby, they are like essentially the foot soldier. Like they're always there. They'll always be part of the fight, and they do cool fight stuff. But there's just not enough book for everybody to have a storyline. And so there's so much book, and there's still just not enough. That's what's so wild. Because again, they rebooted it's the whole universe. Like, there's so much book, and there's no Fantastic Four. There's no, there's so much stuff that's part of the Marvel universe that isn't part of Age of Apocalypse for obvious reasons. But then it leaves this thing where like a lot of people show up on page. And I mean, Kendra is a great example. Like, how she is the person that she is in this book, because the thing that you get from Kendra's history is that she's been doing the eternal grift probably for hundreds of years. It's not a recent thing. So how she's just like, I'm a lady, I hang out with these people now, and isn't like, nobody's worshiping me. I like, Apocalypse, I work for you. You need to give me, the people who will. Yeah. Gideon is an Eternal. Like, the fact that the Eternals are going to come up again later. And I mean, they do. It's they do.
Stupid. I'm still going to roll my eyes.
Yeah, as you should. But like all these things, there's no time for them. But if you know X-Men lore, they're really there. And I don't know, it's not the end of the world that we can't deal with all of it, but it does start to pile up when you're reading it.
I just want to say that on this whole topic, can you imagine being either Pietro or Colossus, two people who should be the most powerful member of any family, and your sister and your brother are so much more powerful than you? How insane that is, that they both have like a reality warping sibling, and then a sibling who is like super Omega level in addition. Just so wild. Because I'm sorry, for me, Wanda and Quicksilver are Magneto's kids. I understand, but like, let me have my fan, and I let everybody else, love
they also are going to retcon that back soon. Like,
anytime.
I mean, yeah, they definitely are going to. Adopted families can be families, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, it's the reason I hate that one, and I've talked about this on the show before, is because he doesn't adopt them. He like inherits
them.
He inherits them as people that he does not realize are his kids, is abusive and horrible just to two lackeys, which whatever, he's a mustache twirling villain when he does that, so whatever. And then discovers that he is their dad, remains terrible to them for most of that time, and then later is like still kind of the worst dad, but is a little bit more like, I love you, I'm just bad at being a dad. And it's only, I can't really even think of it. I mean, like, it's only in the Krakoan era, when he already knows they're not his kids, that he's like, I'll always be your father. And it's said in this way, like, I'll always be your father because I sat there and changed your diaper, or I raised you, or I did any of these things. And none of that is true at all. He's just not a father figure to them. So it doesn't have the same thing as somebody who's like, Mystique will always be Rogue's mother. And again, horrible mother, absolutely terrible. If she is not she's not Mystique's biological child. Mystique still raised her and still has her insane love for her. And that's valid. That's a parent-child relationship, no matter blood or not. Magneto doesn't have a valid relationship with Pietro and Wanda, because he's not just a bad dad. He just wasn't really their father, or their father figure even. And so I just think making it a thing where it's like, okay, we have to deal with this guy, he is our blood, is the only thing that makes sense with that relationship.
Yeah. On the whole, I'm going to give this first book a B. I honestly liked it more than I thought I would. I have a lot of problems with it, but I'm going to give this one a B because I felt like it worked hard to set the stage, even though it already had Alpha before it, but whatever. I thought this was a fun drive into an annual.
I think a B is good. I really wish there had been more. Do we ever see how they kill, or how they turn Genesis into Holocaust?
We might. Honestly, there's so much side stuff, whether it's when he appears in Exiles, or it's the ongoing series as is.
Or
there's a lot of
Nemesis in this. That's right.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of stuff here that just really, I appreciated that it signaled that they were aware that this was a huge universe with a ton of its own lore. And I just think, I appreciate that it can't be all things, and they can't just stop. This isn't the ultimate universe. They're not just going to publish this continuously. But also when they do a little backstory like this, it does sort of speak to the fact that unless you are going to publish a lot of books, there's always going to be stuff missing. And at the same time, if you publish a lot of books, you might be publishing a lot of just like not great content and a lot of noise. It's a very tough balancing act. And it's why I think we are right to be skeptical about doing this, about doing universes like this and trying to do things like say, oh, this is a total rewrite. No, now it's an alternate universe, and sort of wanting to have that cake and eat it too. 30 plus years later, we haven't learned our lesson because we're just doing it again with Age of Revelation.
Speaking of cake, Tales of Age of Apocalypse featuring Factor X, our second title. A couple of things stand out to me right away. I kind of hate that Scott and Alex are foxy boxing. Don't get me wrong. I love it. There's the part of me that always loves when softcore finds its way into mainstream. Great. But the problem with that is then you're sort of like not using that time to develop anything. You're just having them fight half naked. But I already got that in Extinction Agenda. I've gotten that a dozen times and it's great. But you've really got to think about conservation of page space. You've only got so much time. If that's where you want to spend your time, go ahead, do it. But then don't tell me that gave me any further insight into these characters or this version of these characters, because it didn't. You have so many siblings here. You've got the Bouviers, you've got the Bedlams, you've got the St. Croix, you've got the Summerses. This was your opportunity to make a statement about family, and they didn't. This is supposed to be a big issue that makes a powerful statement, and there's even a mind-blowingly irritating year after the fact, because this came out later, this is how Nate Gray exists. Okay, but this is when Sinister wasn't the worst guy in the world. He was just sort of like a dumb scientist with a flat top and way too much Frankenfurter makeup. So, because this is back when Sinister is just basically Frankenfurter in a lab. It's not... So, I don't know. I do want to start with this one does not work for me right off the bat. But it's not because it's bad. It's because it shouldn't have been necessary, and then it wasn't.
This isn't necessary. There's no reason to say it was. The whole story is basically about Corsair coming back to Earth and reuniting with Scott and Alex. And at the end of the day, that is for nothing. That means nothing. Alex is already the way that he is. And that's the thing, is there's no Alex is tipping on the side of, being good or bad or tipping on any side. Alex is just pretty rotted, and Scott is seemingly pretty rotted too, but then we sort of start to see these hints that no, he's not at all. I don't know that it's Corsair showing up really that actually changes that. I think that, again, the writers were sort of too scared to say Scott could be a totally bad character that is swayed by things changing. So what they really are saying is Scott will always be a good guy. And that goodness will come through all of the noise and bad raising by Apocalypse and being part of an elite class of fascist racists. He will always rise above that. I don't buy that. So ultimately, this book doesn't have a lot to say. And you're right. You pointed out such an important thing. There are so many pairs of siblings in this book. And I think it's very funny. Again, this is one that was published in 98. So big retcon prequel. At this point, they do know what's going on with the St. Croix twins.
But I believe it was written before then, so they're stuck with it.
Yeah, just a weird situation happening there. But yeah, I mean, there are so many siblings in this book, and there isn't even a moment of Scott and Alex going, well, hey, at least we're not the Bedlam brothers, or maybe one day we could be as close as Jean-Paul and Jean-Marie. It's just oh yeah, by the way, Sinister forms his elite army out of siblings. Look, isn't that a crazy fact? And then Hank is there Hank's another one. Hank is sort of the flip side of Cyclops. Hank is, he's kind of like Alex, I guess, where the message is Hank will basically always be evil. And the only thing that is saving him from it is the constant influence of his not evil friends being hey, put down the beaker for today and let's go to, Harry's hideaway because if you keep doing science experiments, you will eventually go insane like Mr. Sinister and just think it's okay to experiment on everybody. And in this universe, nobody did that, so he just is evil. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a really good reminder that everybody has sort of lost the plot with Beast for such a long time now.
Oh yeah.
This book is just a statement of facts. Like, it's all just stuff that like is just kind of true, and there's nothing no character development. Christopher gives us nothing. Like, the fact that he's a brood is a really telegraphed.
He's serving. He looks hot as shit.
He do be looking hot. Everybody looks hot. I mean, Nick Epting, there are so many, or Steve Epting, not Nick Epting. It's Nick Napolitano and Steve
Which
Epting.
I ruined earlier, so that's why it's stuck in your head.
We're both good. You know, it is one of those things where sometimes with these guys, you just go like, you made that man very hot, heterosexual dude. Don't know how that happened. But yeah, I mean, this is a C because it's not bad at all. Like, there's no bad writing. There's no like, I can't believe somebody wrote something so stupid. There's nothing convoluted. There's nothing, but it's also, there's nothing A here. There's no writing that is like, again, they missed all the profound moments and it doesn't get us anywhere.
You know, and it's funny because there's certain things that I love here. We get an appearance from Robbie Robertson.
Yeah.
Love that. I always have a problem with it when, like, Sinister, who was able to keep tabs on Cyclops his entire life. Are you telling me in this universe he doesn't just have a tracking device in Scott's leg? Like, that's such a dumb oversight.
Yeah.
I love because I hate this era of Hellfire Club. So I love Warren's Heaven Club. It matches really nicely. But I think the big loser here, the three big losers, are Colleen Wing, Misty Knight, and M-Plate. Because, like, M-Plate has the capacity to be a Sinister level villain, albeit with a funny font. And he instead is just, I don't know. Like, number one, we're going to get to it, but Sugar Man barely exists in the AOA somehow. He's, like, so unimportant for how fun he can be. I don't know. I felt like M-Plate really got the shaft here. He did not get treated like he's M-Plate, and that's interesting because I've always sort of assumed BKV is a Generation X fan, and so it's kind of fascinating that he sucks.
Yeah, I would have really appreciated a different story with all of these characters.
Yeah.
Because I like everybody I'm curious about everybody that's here. I'm just not super curious about this story.
Yeah, I ultimately give this one a B-. And the reason it's a little higher than it would be is because I did love the dedication to sort of painting the picture of what is the slums that would be New York, where we do get Colleen, Misty, Robbie. Like, that's fun. I like the thought on that. Where I gave a much lower grade, and by much lower I mean 2 points. Tales from the Age of Apocalypse featuring X-Men. I don't like this. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to build up to something kinder. I don't care for Magneto at a Mayan temple turned into death camp. Like, that is, you know what? Maybe have some Mayan representation of any kind before you automatically use an ancient Mayan site as a death camp.
Also, like, that's just stupidly impractical. Like, that's not, if you had to do that, you have to put lines in there about the poetry of it or something. Like, why you would just use a McDonald's? Like, there's no need to use a Mayan temple. I know it sounds really edgy to say, but again, that's one of those things where I'm like, creative and editorial, we're just kind of maybe not firing on all cylinders all the time. And also we're just very 90s. I don't know if I read that in a script, I think I stop and go like, let's maybe just make it like the old like football stadium, which feels like a much more practical, also less like, let's use indigenous, like ancient indigenous spots.
Right.
When we give them no page space or, you know, none of their writers are here making these decisions.
And, you know, it's in that same grim, dark 90s way that when Magneto was like, I will reshape it into a war club. What the fuck is a war club that is different from a club?
Yeah.
Or, like, why go out of the way in a book where that's one of the big things that AOA suffers from. Number one, it's still too many words on the page, but deleting necessary articles, deleting necessary pronouns, verbs. Like, there are things that, like, they did and done then. For what? Why not? And it's like, I need you to fill in the fucking words, guys. And, like, so go out of your way to say I can reshape it into a war club. You're just balancing language in a way that's kind of not really kind. You could have just called it a cudgel. Like, you had so many options. What gets a little out of control here is I am a big Exiles fan. I love the 100 issues of Exiles, and then, I love a lot of the Exiles that follows. But Morph ultimately really only works in this issue if you already care about Morph. If not, he is thin, unbalanced. The dialogue winds up really clunky. I don't care for any of the Victor and Clarice stuff. Blink is one of my favorite characters of all time. She's not great here. There's so much that relies on you already caring. Yeah. I refer to this as too written into it, because if you don't already love this book, if you don't already love these characters, it just feels like this was designed to answer specific questions about specific moments, not tell a complete self-contained story. And if that's what you're into buying, if you're into buying like a 4-page backup, that's cool, but I would rather the 4-page backup be in something that tells an original, complete story. This just honestly felt melodramatic with very little payoff.
Yeah, I agree. There's also the fact that we have a completely different death in that first Chronicles book that I talked about with, Kandra Gideon, War and Death. We never find out what happened to that person. And then in this book, we have a new death, and it's Maximus from the Inhumans, which is a huge buy-in that is never in any way paid off. Like, that's another genius scientist with access to a whole other set of tools and materials around creating people with powers. This idea that like every villain is sniping at Apocalypse's heels to sort of throw him off. To say that is the case makes a lot of sense. Of course, they're all bad people. Like of course, there's always going to be like fights for power, but to see it play out is boring. The Sinister's already doing it. Sinister is creating Nate Gray to kill Apocalypse so that he can take over, and that's plenty. That's the guy. That's the next guy who's doing it, and that's the story of the person that is sniping at Apocalypse's heels. Everybody else, of course they are too, but it's boring. Like, for one thing, we have to accept that most of them can't at all. They're just not powered enough. And two, it's the second guy who does it isn't as interesting unless you're really going to tell a Game of Thrones type story where everybody's fighting for control and this guy loses, so this guy wins, and then somebody else comes for that guy, and then somebody returns. But that's not what this is. Again, like that's decades of books being published to tell that story. So this is just this weird one-off where a very weird looking version of Maximus is death, which means nothing because the Horsemen of Apocalypse aren't a thing here. So they just fight weird Inhuman knockoffs, which were actually cool. Like, I say weird, like they just looked weird, but the cool designs. Another cute moment, but you have to know who all the Inhumans are.
And care.
And then care, yeah. And then that's a big part of it too. I agree again about Morph. The one thing I will say here is this gave me a little bit of like, what is Morph's purpose on the team? The one moment where I was like, this is actually a cool purpose. It's the character slapstick, basically. Like, Morph's purpose is that he can be a distraction that can't be killed because he can reform his body. So when he pisses off a villain and distracts a villain and the villain stabs him or rips him apart, that's fine. He'll just reform. And that can lead to some really cool fight scenes and character moments. And we get a couple here that I was like, that's a cool thing that Morph did. But then I don't, like, pathos-wise, I don't care about the character. I don't care that he's also comforting Clarice along with Mr. Creed. None of this stuff, this has already been covered, and we're not getting anything here that is significantly changing what we already knew.
I completely agree. And one of the things that really stands out to me here is that we get things like Death and the, Terrigen Mist, and then there's Death versus Sinister. You layer a lot into this flavor, and then you kind of don't pay it off. So I'm left a little confused as to why we did some of this. I also completely forgot that Blink 1 through 4 is in this. So I've got to give creative credits for that at some point. Jeez. But like, Blink herself is a tough conversation because, Kitty happened. Rogue happened. Jubilee happened. You were told Blink is happening. Why? Because everybody was a big fan of Blink from before Age of Apocalypse when they did Generation Next. So you should be too. And everybody thought she was going to be one of the 4 characters that crossed over into the main Marvel universe. Instead, it's X-Man, Holocaust, Sugarman, and Dark Beast, right? I get it. It's like significant, but people wanted Clarice. And then this Clarice is cooler, no offense, but she's not really earned. she's handed to us. And that's where you need the Winnick series to kind of bridge that. So I feel that this is just an unfortunate C- that just doesn't know how to bring itself to relevancy.
Yeah, and again, it's just I wonder a little bit about what the point was here, what you were going for. This is another book that has a vignette that basically says Scott is a good guy. You know, he does not kill an X-Man, which Sinister would want him to do. That's fine, but it's all just sort of stuff that was already on the page and on the table, and this just doesn't add a ton.
No. And speaking of what doesn't add a ton for me,
good God,
X-Men Chronicles 2 is one of the worst books in the entirety of the AOA universe.
Yeah, and this might be the worst one.
I mean, whether it's... So when Jean leaves, Magneto is like, forgive yourself. I have. Fuck you. She's done nothing to be forgiven for. She's leaving because your team is ineffective and you're a bad leader who puts children in danger, like no better than Apocalypse.
I think she's saying it to him.
Oh, that's just a really poorly placed word bubble?
Yes. I think all four of those psychic bubbles are her speaking.
Oh, God. Well, then let's talk about the lettering.
But also, the lettering is a problem throughout these. And it's funny because it's from different eras. But it is a notable problem throughout. I do think that's her speaking. I don't think that makes the speech much better. I also don't think Logan needs me more than the team. Well, that's one bratty dude. And the reason that he's leaving is because he's upset about you. So if you are going because he's leaving... and he's leaving because he thinks you shouldn't be here anymore, why would you not be like, Logan, I'm actually okay, and I forgive Magneto, and we are going to stay, and this team is the only force that has any chance of opposing. It just makes no sense. Like, it makes just as little sense if Magneto says it as she says it, and then here we get to a point of like, okay, well, this just is not great writing right off the bat.
Truly. And I got to take it a step further. I've done a bunch of reading and I just can't find anything about it. I had to make freaky Beetlejuice face because like this character being named Wolverine is horseshit. One of the most ludicrous things in the entire AOA.
Yeah, this is a character that can give people power. His power, which we don't even know if he's a mutant. His power is that he can give people powers.
Yep.
And that's actually very cool.
Sure is, but what is he? He's in here and nothing else.
Yes, this is a character who has one appearance in this book, and he is named Wolverine, which I get what somebody's great idea was. Logan's name is Weapon X in Age of Apocalypse, and he is never referred to as Wolverine. We did not have any other Wolverines at the time AOA was published. So Laura is not Wolverine. We don't have Akihiro. Nobody else is Wolverine. That name is just out there, and that using it makes a ton of sense. Who would be Wolverine in a world where Logan didn't become Wolverine? Well, I don't think it's this weird, like vaguely Orientalist dude with weird facial hair who has bracers that have a blade on them, but it's not claws, who has no other Wolverine-esque powers, whose power is a very cool power. Like, it's just such a weird mishmash of ideas. This character isn't a bad character in and of himself, but he's not Wolverine, and calling him that and making that the crux of the book makes no sense. And then he's not a great character, so why is he leading a book? It feels like he's leading the book because he's Wolverine, but he's in no way a Wolverine that leads a book. So this is just the worst kind of nonsense, the worst kind of pointless.
And it doesn't get better, unfortunately. No. And like, so for every Uncanny X-Men annual, I think it's 3 that features Archon with, I think it's Perez on art. For every issue like that, there's the Atlantis attacks. I almost said the Atlantic City attacks. Sure. The Atlantis attack stuff from like, 89, 90. That's not as strong, right? This is such a clunker of a title. It's all about this one fight that doesn't do much, doesn't go anywhere, isn't inherently enhanced by itself, doesn't tell a story that I think is worth reading. I feel like I'm getting older talking about it. Like, it's aging me. It's one of those full body scans that tells you your body's biological age. Like, it's terrible for you. And the worst part is there's no joy. Like, I know this is not a joyful world, but the whole idea is if there isn't a light at the end of the tunnel, it's just struggle. And that's not what Game of Thrones is. Game of Thrones is hopefully somebody will take that's why there's Jon Snow. It's hopefully someone will take the crown and it will be a good thing. That's why there's Khaleesi. Hopefully she'll hold on to her sanity. Don't watch the final season. And like, there's all of these ideas that maybe one day joy can return. This issue is not that. This issue serves a greater God, which is this universe is miserable and we need to give you other places to be happy. So here's all the misery. Sorry, I don't want it. I don't want your misery business. This is not a thing I would have purposely spent money on. You know, you can't go into these things knowing how they're going to make you feel, but this for me felt more like satisfying a page count and a number of books on the schedule than it did feel like a structured issue that was integral to the formation of the universe. You could have just told me that Jean and Logan quit. It would have been fine.
And then there's the B plot, which is Rogue, Magneto, and Gambit, and that's worth itchy. Again. Yeah. I've gone over that already. It's weird that Rogue and Magneto are together, but this just like isn't even explaining that story. This isn't written well. This is where we get Magneto saying that he has the biomagnetic field, which again, if Rogue has Polaris' powers, why doesn't she just use the biomagnetic field? Yeah, this is just all around for no one, for nothing. It's not well written. This is a C-, maybe a D+ even. Whatever. I mean, the less said, the better.
And what's so funny is I don't actually think we're moving into anything better when we talk about these X-Mans. So I'm going to say that actually, when we talk about X-Men 1 through 4, along with Excalibur, so it's unfortunate that the two books that I think are the best are probably the two most problematic creators in some ways. To, you know, just touch on Jeff Loeb, while he's done a lot of really good things and has certainly apologized, he made some really uncomfortable comments about that Marvel TV can't produce shows with Asian leads. That's super problematic. And, you know, when you go into something like his X-Men run, which heavily features a Native American character, it's why whenever anybody's like, oh, I was making fun of someone else, I didn't make fun of you, right? Well, that makes me just think that, what are you saying about me when I leave the room, right? So there's a level that's not cool. So it's unfortunate that those are going to be two of my highest grades. However, the Terry Kavanagh years of X-Men are my least favorite years of X-Men. I actually really don't like Steve Scrose's art on X-Men early. I think on Jeff Loeb's era, I think it's chonky at best, with a lot of like, wah faces, right? Like everybody, if a line adds a year to your age, his X-Man is literally older than the planet. He's got so many lines on his face. I mean, he's got so many lines, he's the bathroom at Studio 54. So these two issues, the art's a lot stronger, but we haven't met X-Man yet in any of this. What are they doing here? And you're trying to answer questions that haven't even been asked yet. So it's so weird and confusing, because like there's like Halloween has that pathway where like if you watch the TV version of Halloween, then Laurie is Michael's sister, and then you watch that trilogy including H2O. But if you watch Halloween the original, then you can jump to Halloween Returns and that continuity where they're not siblings. But either way, you have the choice of the question is presented so it gets an answer. Here they tell you in advance, oh, by the way, this is X-Men and here's what he's gonna do. I don't even know that I don't like these titles so much as I think where they're placed ruins so much of Nate's story.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And it's something that I have a lot of trouble honing in on because of how I actually read. If anybody read this in order and that was their introduction to X-Men, it would be really weird. What's a bummer here is the X-Men -1 story is not the worst. No. It's Nathaniel Essex's -1, and that's actually an interesting story.
That's a great point.
Like there's a little bit of writing missing, and there's a little bit of a flourish and like a serif on the font of Nathaniel Essex in this story. But this is basically him, and it's so funny now because having gone through the Krakoan era and seen so much more of Nathaniel Essex, the man, and the motivations of that man to do the stuff that Sinister did and to become Sinister and to become other people. This feels like a story about that Nathaniel Essex, about the man from the Victorian era, just sort of having a dialogue with himself about the idea of raising another child. This man who, had a wife and a child and was going to be a father, and then that was all taken from him and he went crazy and did a lot of very insane stuff. and, you know, got involved with Apocalypse. And then in this universe, ultimately raised, at the very least, the Summers brothers, probably more than that. And not well and not lovingly, but was their father figure, and then comes across this child. And I don't know, like, almost has a moment, almost maybe like is like, and I will say Roger Cruz, and it's funny because I there were times where I thought this was Joe Mad.
I get that.
But Roger Cruz's art really, I think, makes him look like a charming little kid. And there is a level to which Sinister, I feel like, is charmed by him. And it all is cool, but it is X-Man -1. And it does, I'm putting a bunch of stuff in there that is not on page. It's my desire and what I'm reading into it, but I don't think it's even the author's intention. And I do believe that the author's intention is much more to tell you about one day in the life of Nate Gray before he became Nate Gray. And it's a weird day, and it's dominated by Mr. Sinister, but this is answering questions about this character that you can't even know you had. And I don't know that if you had those questions, it would be the best thing for the writer to answer them. And I don't know if it is the best thing for the writer to answer them if these were good answers to write. So that's layers of like not the best. And it's really too bad because the Sinister story is not a bad one. It is a very believable one, and one that I think could and should exist in this. I
really vibe with that because, like I even said, I don't know that they're bad issues, but where they're placed is bonkers.
Yeah.
You know, there's sort of a question about empathic moralism that's produced by this issue, where Nate automatically knows that the things he's seeing are wrong, despite having been held in a tube his whole life. Like, there's a sense that the character is so good that this is how he feels. And I love that. But yeah, this is really more about Sinister. And not that there's anything wrong with having a character get a spotlight issue of something else. There's a long history of like Carol's alcoholism over in the regular Marvel universe is really well presented at times by Eric Larson during his run of Wolverine, right? So like there's so much there, you know, like Carol and Wolverine have such a great relationship for so long. It's why I'm so happy when she shows up here, referenced by another writer. But the thing that I kind of feel like, and I want to talk about these two together almost, believe it or not, the annual came out about a few months before -1 did. So they're published in reverse order in this book, well after anything else in this book is published. And I feel like if this issue is kind of the Sinister story, this other issue is the everybody watching Nate Gray story. Not to bring up another deeply problematic creator, but it's almost the way so many issues of Sandman are other people looking at Morpheus.
Yeah.
This is one of the more complicated things that I did a complete read through of the X books, and I definitely didn't download any via torrents. I definitely bought them all.
Well, they're all available, so why would you need to do that, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And this is like back in my 20s, so like honestly, this is like I think where I stopped. They had just brought back the Astonishing run after it had been gone for a few years, and they did that thing with like Bloodstorm making out with Cyclops on that cover. So like this is like a decade ago at this point that I finished that run, and I remember hitting this point and saying, I just can't do one more fucking issue that's meant to tell me things I emotionally already know that has no bearing on storytelling, that has no bearing on character. Stop doing it. And what I'm seeing now by going back and reading it in this way, not trapped, this is a little bit more about Mimic. This is a little bit more about Forge and Mastermind. This is more about the people that aren't Nate Gray. And I think part of what that really tells me as a reader, as a person who's trying to absorb this material, is there are ways to massage content. There are ways to put this all together that makes it feel better. I personally think both of these books get a C+, but where they're placed in these volumes, I give them both a D because, again, you're answering questions I haven't even known to ask yet. And that is a frustration that I think really hurts the epic body. The same way we said at the start of this, leaving out the Chronicles hurts the omnibus body.
Yeah, I'm about with you on the grades. I mean, I love X-Men's one of my favorite characters, and so this is a joy for me to read. But you're right about the annual. It's not even a bad thing. But the choice here is, this is kind of, Statler and Waldorf waiting for Godot. Who is it? What are their names?
Statler and Waldorf are usually waiting for Fozzie.
Statler and Waldorf, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. This is
Timon and Pumbaa.
There you go. Perfect. This is Forge and Magneto looking at the firestorm that is Nate Gray and going like, oh shit, which is, again, not a bad, in the exact same way that's not bad to have Nathaniel Essex look at him. It's not bad to have them do it either. He is a force of nature. He sort of does, if you're going to make him so OP, it makes sense to have other characters, like to have the story focus on other characters just regarding him in the same way they would prepare for a hurricane. And so there is something there. That snippet of how you might tell a Nate Gray story is a good one. Execution, not great. It wastes Sugar Man, presents him as like both not nearly a big enough threat and way too big a threat at the same time. It gets us way too much thinking about something they should not ever want us thinking about, which is, wait, are they over in another universe? Or, they do time travel shenanigans. They just make us think about it too much. And the problem is, when they ultimately do just say, this is Earth 295 and we're going to hop over to it, it becomes a little more difficult to take this seriously when this one is so desperate to say, like, no, they're not hopping over to another universe. They're going back in time to the point, but that can't make any sense because that time, even if you go back in time, that timeline never happened. They repaired it. There's so much. Anyway, there's no good ways to get either of these titles right without really fundamentally rethinking what you're trying to do here and what your priorities are. So unfortunately, they do not accomplish what I think they set out to. They do accomplish some other really cool things, and they present to you the promise of other great ideas. And I think if you're a storyteller, again, like reading to sort of understand how you could pick up the good ideas, and you can pick up on this thing of like, Harry Potter kind of sucks. I mean, the whole franchise is terrible, but Harry Potter, the character, kind of sucks. It's not really super fun to watch him at all, but it's sometimes really interesting to see how everybody else reacts to Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And, when you think you've created a great main character, sometimes you have to ask yourself, like, did I fall so in love with this main character that I'm now just kind of, A, making them too OP and making their challenges not really particularly identifiable, but B, like, maybe it's time to spend some time with those around them. And I think this does a good job of that.
On that topic, I just want to say I'm not just a huge John, Rice, Sabella, and Lane fan. Lion King 1.5 is actually based on Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, the same way Lion King is based on Hamlet. So, like, it actually is, they were actually like, hey, Tom Stoppard, let's talk about it with some talking warthogs. So, like, it really is like a tradition. A lot of things love to do exactly what we're talking about, that view these characters from that other place. It's just unfortunate that the way this presents is tough, because even if it wasn't out of place, it was at a point where people didn't care anymore. Because you can go look at the sales on these, and they weren't gobstopping. They were not what everybody had been waiting for all their lives. So it's a little tough. I think these read better in concept than in execution, and that's just kind of fine. Now, just to put it out there, because I was a bad man and I left it out, we got Blink 1 through 4 from December 2000 through April 2001. This is like firmly new X-Men territory, my friends. That's by Lobdell and Winnick, Trevor McCarthy, Tyson McAdoo, Norm Rapund, Rodney Ramos, Rick Ketchum, Liquid as the colorist, Richard Starkings from Comic Craft alongside Saida Temofonte. And I am just going to put out there that, again, I'm a big Exiles guy. I'm a big Blink guy. This is a character that I feel very strongly about, that I think is really terrific. And I'm not here for Blink slander. I think this miniseries across the board is a B. I think the biggest problem is issue 1. There's a few too many things going on. Rogue, Impossible Man. Ultimately, Blastar isn't great in the first issue. What I think is really cool about this miniseries is you're proving the validity of Blink in other situations. You can't prove the validity of a lot of these characters for me in other situations. As a matter of fact, the thing I don't like about X-Man is putting him back in the AOA. I think he is one of the first things we ever bonded over was a shared love of Nate Gray. I think this is a really fun miniseries that's totally devoid of AOA in ways that make it so much stronger, so much better, so much more fun. It's charming. It's high energy. It's 4 issues that give you a lot of fun. The only thing I hate is that Blink doesn't know who she is for way too much of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those stories that's trying to say, again, like no one's on message for, there's no clear message, but this is a story that's trying to say you are always who you are. And without your memories or knowledge, the core of you will always be you. So it doesn't matter that Blink doesn't remember who she is. Once she does, she's Blink. And she was Blink the whole time. I agree. I mean, this is essentially a solo Exiles adventure that, for whatever reason, they decided starts during her time in Age of Apocalypse. And then, has a cute little tag at the end that reveals how she gets into Exiles, which is totally fun. There's nothing wrong. It's all good. It's all very, very good. This is not like that Nate Gray -1 story, which is really supposed to meant to give you more lore about Nate in the Age of Apocalypse. And this is not like Chronicles 1, which is meant to tell you about a time before the X-Men AOA X-Men #1 had started, where this team was a little bit different. And here's some origin lore. This is really Clarice away from AOA is still a really strong, interesting character, which I already would have believed, but this is a totally fine example of it. I think it's weird. Her first love interest ever being Annihilus's human form is wild, and I would love to bring that character back.
Oh yeah, great design.
Yeah, very, very late 90s design, but there's a lot of cool stuff that you could do with it. I don't know. There was nothing wrong with this. This was a great, again, solo Blink of the Exiles adventure. The way they weaved it together to be an Age of Apocalypse prequel, it's totally fine. I'm not bothered by it. It really is not that, but it's not, the way they've done it is not in a way where I'm like, oh, I'm mad, I'm annoyed. It's totally fine. At the end of the day, this is a great character, and it's a great character that came out of AOA. So there's nothing about it that I'm mad at.
And I love that it's Judd Winnick who goes on to write the bulk of early Exiles. And when he's done, when he's like, guys, I'm peacing out, I got a DC exclusive deal, he hands Marvel the next year of scripts and says, go ahead and publish them, right? Only what Marvel does is they cut them with Chuck Austin scripts and release them bi-weekly. So you get 2 a month. And sometimes they're Winnick, sometimes they're Austin, and then it winds up just kind of putting the book in a weird place that doesn't feel great all the time. I think that one of the other things that this miniseries really proved is that you can do a quick jaunt somewhere else that feels high energy, even though it didn't have more Magneto, more Rogue, more Apocalypse. It had another set of threats. And the truth is, the X-Men always have multiple threats going. There's no point where the X-Men only have one villain for 4 years. So reminding us that there were other things going on that weren't just the overall threat of Apocalypse. That's so important. And so I felt charmed by this. I felt kind of re-energized because, like we just said, the X-Men stuff felt maybe a little out of left field a little bit. And putting this back front and center in an exciting place, in a storytelling place, that's really cool. And I look forward to getting to Exiles again. I mean, like I said, I've read everything called Exiles at this point, even like the Malibu-verse stuff, which has nothing to do with Exiles. But I've read it all. I remember really liking a lot of it, and this reminded me why. And I'm really excited to get there.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, Exiles is unique in X books. I mean, it's unique in, I think, kind of all Marvel books, but as an X team, it's unique. I think the run came at a really special time. I think it's got great stuff. And yeah, exactly as you said, this was sort of a reminder of one of the things that makes Exiles great.
And, one of the things that I really enjoyed about this project is I sat here and I read them to you. I gave everything a grade. My grade for this book overall is actually going to be a B-, and that's higher than I thought it would be. Little spoiler, they're all roughly around here with one notable exception. The presentation of this to read a universe wasn't great. The presentation of this to reread Age of Apocalypse, that was pretty cool. I feel like I liked some characters more, I liked some characters less. I now can articulate what I don't understand is when you take away the journey and you just give us the destination, it's not the same thing. It's getting there that makes it exciting. If you didn't get here with the X-Men and then kind of understand everything that went into it, there's a lot here that doesn't always work, because one of the other things about time stories is like, it's that time. Right? That's why Days of Future Past doesn't have X-Men that don't appear for 10 years at first. Later tellings get them, but the original one doesn't. That's why there is no Kamala Khan in this version of AOA, but we get her in that AOA giant size. You know, there's such a give and take with pocket stories like AOA that when you're able to kind of separate it from the way it's fucked with time, and you even give them their own pocket stories like Blink, it gives a charm. It gives something that's special. I feel like maybe it doesn't come across the way I would like it to. It's not exactly, you know, it's not glistening baccarat, but it's lovely.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big problem here is that things are not coming across the way that I think everybody intended for them to, or that would be their best foot forward. As people, we all have that. Like, we all know that we're great, and sometimes we just don't put our best foot forward in a moment, and that doesn't make us any less awesome in a given moment. And the same really can be true for stories. How they're packaged is part of it, and they can be great stories, and they can have great things in them, and just sort of not be at their best in their placement and how they're experienced, and that doesn't take away the great things.
Yeah, you know, I'm really excited to keep going with this read. Now, just to kind of remind people, like we've said a few times, this show is going back to all of the X-Men stories that we love, and we are dialing into a lot of our favorite storytelling for X-Men, and we're looking at classic eras. So in the next couple of weeks, you're going to be able to check out some, as far as we're concerned, some of the best stories of X-Men ever, whether it's by virtue of talking about them, it's what we love, or it's the actual book is great. Next week, you guys can check us out covering Uncanny X-Men 366 through 371, X-Men 85 to 91, the Magneto War #1, Magneto Rex 1 through 3, Unlimited 23 through 24, and X-Men Annual 99. Before, and that's Christmas Eve, right? And then on New Year's Eve, we'll be covering Age of Apocalypse Books 2. That's X-Men Alpha, Age of Apocalypse, The Chosen, Generation Next 1, Astonishing X-Men 1, Excalibur 1, Gambit and the Externals 1 and 2, Weapon X 1 and 2, Amazing X-Men 1 and 2, Factor X 1 and 2. I'm so tired. X-Man 1. After that, we'll be taking a look at the Shattering event, which is Uncanny 372 to 375, X-Men 92 to 95, Astonishing X-Men 1 through 3, and that's the third volume. So, or second volume, second volume, yeah, right. Great news, second volume. Everyone's doing great. Wolverine 1 through 45. No, Wolverine 145, X-Men Unlimited 25, and then we're gonna break in the middle of January to have like an episode where we talk about news, new titles, and more. So we've got an action-packed month coming your way. Super excited to bring it all to you. TK, I'm really glad that we made this sojourn into the Age of Apocalypse. It's been a lot of fun. It's been exciting. And if for no other reason, it gave me an opportunity to think critically about what I do and don't like about this universe, and take stock of what makes something exciting for me.
Yeah, similar for me. You know, I've always loved Age of Apocalypse too much. I'm very, very forgiving of it. And I think it's really tough for me to read the primary sequence without just slipping right back into being a kid and being charmed by it. I actually really like reading these accessory stories because they give me an opportunity to like experience the world, but with that more critical eye. And I think that's going to be really helpful when we start actually digging into the real Age of Apocalypse stuff. Having started here, being a little bit more like none of what we read today is beloved to me, but it's also really connected to the stuff that has been in the past. And so I'm excited that I sort of like got this warm up critical moment to maybe read Age of Apocalypse a little more realistically this time. I'm always going to love it, but I think at 40 now, I think I'm old enough to start really flexing the critical muscles on it and just not letting it have a pass.
I love that. But if anybody wants to talk to you about these critical flexes and also coming down on books that need it, where can they find you?
You can find me on the socials, mostly Instagram and Blue Sky, at TK Accidental. Where can they find you?
guys can find me at Nico Action, NICOACTION, Blue Sky, Instagram, and more. But if you guys want to check out this show, don't forget to check us out. You can find us at X's for Comics, as well as our YouTube feed, which, hey, if you're watching, what's up? Like, comment, subscribe. We want to know more about you guys. That's X's for Show. But 3 things you guys can do for yourselves. Number 1, please stay safe. Crazy world out there. Number 2, please be brave. But number 3, evolve daily. Who you were yesterday, that's Age of Apocalypse. Who you are today, that's Age of X. But who you are tomorrow, that's Age of You. And we can't wait to be there for that. So until then, see ya.